Hi all, my name's John. I'm not a skilled woodworker by any means. I took shop back when I was in seventh grade, so I know a little bit about how to use tools. But what I want to try to do today is to show how uh, you might be able to make your own computer stand, which normally is being sold for $250 on the internet. But basically, all you need is a one piece of birch, 2 feet by 4 feet, which runs about $28. And from that, you can make all the pieces that are necessary.
This is a screenshot of the internet advertisement for the Harmoni Standing Desk. Looks pretty nice. But as you see, you can get a special deal. They've marked it down from $300 to $250, a little too much for me. One of the nice things about this internet advertisement is that they have very clear pictures of what the four pieces of wood look like. And they also provide the dimensions for the pieces of wood, which will allow me to make my own versions of it. As you see from the screenshot, the top shelf has the dimensions of 35 by 25 centimeters, the bottom shelf 80 by 20 centimeters, and the base 35 by 40 centimeters. It doesn't give the dimensions of the part of the tower with slots in it, but that can be figured out.
So, the way I got the dimensions that were missing from the description was I just used this little ruler to measure how many millimeters a particular edge was where they had given uh, the length in centimeters. So, for example, on this long shelf, they said it was 80 centimeters long, and that gives 94 millimeters by my ruler. And the fraction is therefore 0.85, and I can measure any other dimensions here that are missing, like this tower, in millimeters and multiply it by 0.85 to get centimeters. The little tabs, which don't have dimensions and so forth. And then finally, converting it all to inches. Not that I mind working with metric, but none of my larger rules have metric markings on them. So I had to multiply centimeters times 0.394 to get inches. And so we find out that this center tower is about the same length of the largest shelf. The slots are 5 inches. The lowest slot here, where the base goes in, is about 9 inches. This width here is the same as the width of the base, which is going to be nice. It'll allow things to line up nicely. And this particular shelf I actually made a little bit wider than it calls for, 24 centimeters instead of 20, just because it works out nicely when you cut the four pieces from one piece of wood.
So here I've made a picture where I've arranged the four pieces to show how they fit into the 2 foot by 4 foot uh, piece of birch plywood. It turns out that these measurements are very close to what I ended up with, but not exact. In fact, I had to end up cutting a piece down, as I'll explain later. But I think the measurements here are close enough so that you could use this as a template for cutting the pieces yourself.
Here are the cuts so far. I began uh, attempting to cut the wood with my circular saw, but as seems to often be the case when I use that saw the blade gets hot and starts burning the wood. So I just switched over to my little saber saw here. And even though it doesn't do quite as straight a line, it doesn't have the problem cutting. And I'm going to be sanding the edge anyway to round it a bit. And so I don't think it matters that it's not absolutely straight. I guess this wouldn't be real unless I had a little actual action here with the tool. So here we go. Okay, well, that's about enough for today. I've got the main pieces cut out. Things went really well. Wish I'd started with the saber saw instead of the circular saw, which made that edge not quite very nice, but we'll take care of that with sanding. Next step will be drilling holes and using the saber saw to make the slots where the pieces will fit in the center board there. Here we are the next day, and I have cut the first slot and made my first serious mistake in that the orientation of the slot is not correct. It's sort of off to the right, lower on the right side, which means that this is not balanced correctly. And what I'm going to have to do is just cut off the end, try again and have a slightly shorter tower. Hopefully do a better job of getting the measurements right this time. And success, that's much better. Now the stand sits squarely the way it's supposed to. The next step we have here is drilling holes on either side of where the slots are going to be. And I don't want to drill them all the way through or it'll splinter out the other side. So I have to stop right before it goes through, and then I'll flip the board over and drill from the other side. Okay, so what I discovered here after I finished cutting all the slots and assembling this is that the whole structure is really sensitive in terms of how much this tower part has to lean back in order for these shelves to not pull forward too hard with the weight. When I had put the piece that's supposed to be back there in, with even nothing on the shelves, just the weight of the shelves themselves, it pulled the tower forward. And by experimenting, I found that just a little bit of length on that support is what's needed to hold the tower at the right angle so that the weight of the shelf balances properly. So what I'm going to do next, I'm not sure. I'll have to put some thought into it. Okay, I've solved the issue of this tower leaning forward too much and the shelves pulling it forward and tipping it over. The problem, after looking at some videos and pictures online, is that the top portion of the tower has to be leaning over quite a bit down to the base here in order to have the proper counterbalance of the shelves. And so what I did is I had to do some trimming so these slots can't be square. They actually need to come out like this at an angle a bit. And I've put made the first one like that, and everything is fine as far as the tower sitting up. But of course the shelves now are not really quite the right angle, and so I'm going to have to do the same thing for the other slots in order that these shelves are closer to parallel to the ground. A little bit more work, but apparently that's what's necessary. I thought it might be helpful to explain how I got the angle on those slots. Normally the base of the saber saw is 90 degrees from the blade. As you see, I've tilted the bottom of it by loosening the screw in the back. And I suppose there might have been a way to figure out exactly what that angle is supposed to be. I got lucky, I suppose. I just tried 60 degrees and set the base at that angle. And that apparently worked to set the saw at the correct angle. Of course, when I had to do the top and the bottom differently, and that meant rocking it around to the other side when I switched from top to bottom. But all in all, even though this is a fair amount of extra work, fortunately, it was the solution to get the angles correct on the slots. And that seemed to do it. The shelves are now going in nicely and sitting parallel to the ground the way they should be. So all I've got to do now is just some sanding to make it a little prettier. Maybe putting on some kind of a varnish finish or something. And it'll be ready to go. And there we have it, the completed stand. It's nice and sturdy, holds things at the right height. I finally got the standing desk I always wanted, and for only $28 in materials and a few hours.